The sheep out in the meadow and the coyote in the
Vampires are much different than popular beliefs claim, even in Witcher setting communities. As well, many information indicate that a vampire in the Witcher setting is not an undead monster that haunts human settlements. But let's start from the beginning. Now, vampires are divided into two groups: higher vamps and lower vamps. The characteristics change, but the principles are the same. It's a being of powerful presence. Lower ones are indeed monsters, not conscious of one's actions and indeed monstrous in their behavior. But the higher ones, that is a totally different question. So, among the higher vampires we have mules, katakans, bruxas, alps, and finally the Nosferatu. Lower ones are fledders, echimas, and garcains. Sapkowski describes vampires in his books in opposition to many traditional representations we all know from common descriptions and pop culture. So, a Witcher lore vampire, the higher one especially, is not pushed to drink blood. It is not necessary for a vampire's survival. Blood is more like an addiction, like alcohol, and it is a source of pleasure if drinked. Vampires are not affected by holy water or any religious symbols. Sunlight affects only some of the inflicted vampires. Again, it is not dangerous to higher ones, but can damage the lower ones. If a vampire bites a living person, the bitten will not actually transform. Vampires are not technically dead or undead. It seems that vampiric state is just another consequence of the conjunction of the spheres that happened some 500 years ago. Finally, a wooden stake can't kill a vampire for good. Vampires can also regenerate wounds, even severed limbs. It takes even years, but is possible to bring a vampire back to his full body. To add to the mix, high vampires are also not vulnerable to silver. In light of these facts, one can conclude that the vampire is, in The Witcher, almost invincible. This is the case with Emil Regis Rohelek Tercif Godefro, Geralt's friend and a very powerful vampire. For short, he is called Regis. He is the source of a lot of information I can give you here. For example, he was even able to trick Witcher medallions and not to trigger its monster detection. So, how do you actually detect a hidden among humans vampire? You can use animals, for example. Horses and dogs can sense vampires by smell. Regis, to avoid this type of detection, was using strong herbs. The big mystery is how one actually changes into a vampire. If not by a bite, then how? It is really not shown in the lore. One can assume that the change happened some time ago. For Regis, we can point that he lived during the conjunction of the spheres. In the books, he is 642 years old, counting by the elven calendar. So, are these entities even monsters? To be honest, we don't know. The lower ones, indeed, they kill and haunt, but it's the higher ones that can be a real threat. Regis gives us an information that can actually puzzle your mind even more. He says there are 1,200 higher vampires in the world. Vampires like him, Nosferatu, and so on. They are less willing to attack humans. They are aware of themselves and they created a sort of a community with its own culture, its own beliefs, and own moral standards. So, if you see a vampire, what will you do? Considering that not all of them are actual threat, or are they just, well, another race, a minority affected by persecution and superstition?